Hello, everyone. On the back of four consecutive defeats, I began this day thinking we had a fifth one right in front of us. I was preparing for an episode that was going to be about how we were dismantled and how this was expected and how we can salvage our season. Because while Arvind might disagree, I still feel we're in we could be in a relegation scrap. But the truth is, I think, and as most United fans would concur, or actually anyone watching the game would concur, that United really kind of sprang a surprise at Liverpool. And it actually went both ways, wherein you saw a strong United performance and a pretty lackluster Liverpool performance, if you think about it. And maybe the stats, again, with the expected goals might kind of, for the folks who didn't watch the game, might paint a different story. But for those who watched it, you could tell this was a team that was there to fight. Right. And I think, Arvind, if like we've been crying out for weeks now, we just want, again, the tactics will take some time. Like Amorim will take time to build a team, but we want desire. We want a team that's fighting for those duels, for like, creating chances. And I feel like we saw a lot of that today. So yeah, initial reaction to a 2-all, well fought, and I feel like a fair result, the draw.
Yeah, it felt like a real throwback game, right? Like that's what I would start off by saying. It felt like an old school kind of Barclays game, everything at 100 miles per hour. Really solid United performance. Really, all we could have asked for when it comes to, Anfield, and a bit of what's been missing, I think, a little bit when we've gone and got battered there in the past, which is a little bit of street smartness, like just not being naive in terms of like just wanting to start play constantly, giving yourself that breather and a moment of rest, willing to put the studs on the ball. We saw that quite a few times, right? And I think like it was quite brave for us to continue doing that even when some folks were on cards and even when folks were tiring, right? So I think that was nice to see. And I think in general, when it came to the duels, that is the big thing that stood out, right? Which is we sometimes lack both like the intention to win the duel and then the execution to actually go and win it. And today you had a bit of both, right? And that's all you want to see, which is like the days in which you just sit off with no intention, you're going to get battered. The days in which you go in with the right intentions and execute poorly, you probably are still going to get battered, probably not as badly as the first one because the opponent at least knows they're in for a scrap, whether or not do they have to fight to get it. Today it felt like they were in for a scrap and they were in for a team that wanted it as much as they did. So it was really good to see. So overall, I think excellent performance. Probably not the result we wanted overall, I think, but we'll be happy with the point at Anfield in general.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about our record at Anfield over the last decade or so, like to score two goals to get a point, I think just looking at what we've done over the last 10 years at the ground is is a great result, right? I think all of us would have taken a point at the start of the game. I think again, just given the chances that we had, and we kind of dissect the individual moments, but it does feel a little disappointing, especially because we potentially could have won the game with the last kick of it. But overall, I think I'm really happy. Again, I think I agree with everything you said in terms of actually showing intent, right? I think that's where it starts when you're kind of playing a derby, like when you want to kind of go into those tackles, you want to kind of again quieten the crowd because Anfield is like that 12th player. It's one of those stadiums where it can really kind of bring you down as a team, and I felt like we really kind of stood up to the challenge. And if we were to start going into the specifics now, I think the big difference that we saw in the Newcastle game that we lost as well was immediately with Menu coming on, there was the midfield dynamic change. And I felt today as well, Ugarte was brilliant. I thought he had a really good game. I thought some of his passing as well, like even the one at the end might have been a little lucky. But again, I just felt controlled I think the momentum of the game for large parts. Both of them, again, have got the legs to kind of cover vast spaces, and something that we would need in this Amorim system. So I felt like, again, I thought more or less the team, like individually and just cohesively, really kind of clicked. I felt like the league did have a couple of moments where you were like, here we go again. But I think, and maybe this went under the radar, but I thought Euro put in a match saving tackle, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's what it excites me, that there are, again, there's going to be a clear out in the summer. I think there's no one's under any other uh, uh, misconception around that. But I feel like the youngsters, right, like whether it's Euro, whether it's Ahmad, whether it's Ugarte, I feel like uh, again, just to kind of see them not be overawed by the stage, as we've seen over the last few years, was really kind of, I think, made me excited for the road ahead.
Yeah, I think the thing that struck me when I was looking at this game was like, let's say somebody like Ugarte, right? Like we've always been told he's a bit of like, a little bit thuggish, goes in. What stood out much more for me was just like how decent he was. I wouldn't say he was really good on the ball, but he was pretty decent on the ball, especially for somebody who's like at the heart a destroyer. There were a couple of passes, especially played out wide, where he was passing into space versus passing to the man, and that's actually really, really important because a wing back heavy system, as folks know, needs your like runners, and like typically when you want runners, you want them taking the ball with momentum, not taking the ball to feet and then trying to get ahead. So those are the small kind of things that you can see, and that's where like I think the training ground work is starting to pay off. It's the small things that you see that really is telling you that Amorim's got an eye for detail, and the players have the ability to execute. Probably you'll get better and better as time goes on. That was really good to see. The challenge fundamentally still is it's a hodgepodge squad, right? And I think we're going to see a lot of compromises. Not so much from like Amorim compromising on his philosophy, but having to compromise on how it can be executed given the players that he has. And I think Delict is actually a really good example of it, right? I think we've spoken about this a few times, which is both Delict and Martinez are neither of them are channel what's known as channel defenders, right? Like players who you would, the situation where I think every United fan has like nightmares about this, but like when Salah was like in the 7-0 kind of going down and Martinez, that's the worst possible position for a Martinez or Delict to be in because they're not set up to be able to defend that kind of space. And you can understand why we wanted Euro and why we still want Branthwaite, right? Or we go in for something like Diamante. You want somebody who can lock that down. Maguire is actually an excellent fit for the center CCB, right? I love this redemption arc with the 1 year extension for him. Of course, he could have won it, but I think he had an excellent performance today, right? Like everything from the passing to like in the air, I think he did a really good job. Corners, we still like don't look anywhere close to convincing. And still like what stood out to me was early on in the game we had like Mainu who was marking Van Dijk, like something is wrong if that is the way in which you're setting up to mark potentially the best player in the air in the entire league. So here are some things that we need to like still work through, but overall, I think really good individual performances. You could very clearly see what or where we want to improve the team, and that's actually much better than like when we were with Ten Hag, where because we had no like north star of how we wanted to play and what good looks like, you can't actually build towards, right? So that itself is like a refreshing change here.
Right. And I think we'd be remiss if we don't mention Bruno because I think he's got a lot of slack and rightly so. I think his performances have been indicative of the overall team, and I think again just been rash in and out of possession over the last few games. And again, he at the end of the day, he is that person who can make those openings, right? Like even for the second goal, again might get overlooked, but that pass was perfectly angled, perfectly weighted for Garnacho to then play it into Ahmad. So he's probably one of the only players apart from Eriksen who we can't play week in week out who has that in him. And I completely agree with you that he might not be the long-term solution under Amorim. I agree. I think we need a far more diligent player out of possession, again with creativity. And I think there are youngsters out there who could kind of fill that void. But I think today, after everything that we've gone through and everything that happened with his red card, I thought he really put in a captain shift. I thought emotionally, I thought he managed the game well. He never let his cool get to him. He was communicating really well with Ugarte Meno. And I felt like even there were moments where I was like, all right, the ball's going to be pinched off him. I thought he kind of held the ball up well as well. And I think it was really a commanding performance. Even his awareness to pick out Martinez for that cutback of sorts was perfect. So I think shout out to Bruno. He kind of delivers these performances from time to time. Again, consistency is an issue, but for a game like this where I felt like that we were not going to have any control whatsoever, I thought he was like really central to everything that we were creating.
Yeah, agree. You have to give him his flowers, as like the kids say these days, right? I think like the challenge fundamentally with Bruno is that he's much better when plays in front of him, and I think like he was most effective today when he came deeper and deeper. It's just that I think like the demands of the two like number 10 roles in this Amorim system, it forces him to do a lot of things he's like very uncomfortable with, which is like receiving with the back to the goal, right? Like playing like these kind of like dinky hold back passes to make the run in behind. Those are not the things that he typically does very naturally. So I think that's a big challenge, I think, with Bruno longer term in the system. But I think he does much better in the system when he's further back, and actually you can see us playing him further back. And given like it's going to be an evolution, right? We're not going to get there in like a year or two, maybe even three. We'll probably see a few of these like won't say square pegs in round holes, but like
Yeah.
oval pegs in round holes at least, I think is going to definitely happen over the next couple of years. I can see like Martinez, for example, being an emergency center midfielder in a few games going forward. So you'll probably have to see like these systems play themselves out over time. But I think that really takes me to the tactics, right? I think like um, it was a bit of a old school, the performance it reminded me a little bit of was like Tuchel going to like, stadiums away and like setting up this extraordinarily tight mid block, right? Like a mid block that's very tightly coached, highly compact out of possession. Got these micro automations, not just like full fledged. I'm taking balls from like front to back. We had these micro automations just to like relieve pressure, which was really nice to see. Um, I thought that he got the tactics spot on, and actually would prefer him not trying to like press like a madman with the current side that he has, and actually spit a bit more in this mid block. Thoughts, Kush?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think something that you pointed out during the game as well, I felt just in terms, I think the big problem that we have seen over the last few weeks with this system is that it relies so heavily on the wing backs being efficient both offensively and defensively. And while Dallo and Mazraoui again more proficient defensively, and we've kind of seen both of them leak goals through individual errors. But I felt today, I personally felt like they were just instructed to kind of be higher up when we have the ball, or kind of be ready to kind of make that push to again stretch the team a bit, which I thought they did really effectively, especially Dallo. I felt like again it was, you kind of called it out. Trent would have been a perfect player in the system, right, on the right. But I thought today, and I personally felt that he was being caught out pretty often, and that was also down to the fact where like Dallo's average position throughout the game, like he was always an option, always had a run up against like Trent, and I felt like that really made a difference today. Again, with the legs in midfield, I felt like you always had that ball out to either of the wing backs, and they again were usually usually in positions to kind of make an impact. And I think if I was thinking about specific instances, I think your point about Ugarte's balls into space or Bruno's balls into space makes a lot of sense, because you always had that moment where we had that overload, but we kind of played the ball into space and these guys were up there, like even towards the end of the game where Mazraoui was kind of free on the right. So I feel like that has come through coaching. I think this system is new. I think it's a lot of information to process positionally in terms of like offensive actions, patterns. There's a lot going on here, and it requires a lot of discipline. So I feel like we will see, hopefully, a more efficient version of it in the weeks to come. We have another 7 days before the next game, and I think that's again, Amorim was put in a terrible kind of position by the board, right? Like we had 2 international breaks before that, but like here he was with this congested fixture list during the holidays, and like there's really not much you can do on the pitch with the
And
team.
the big thing as well is like, people talk a bit about 3-4-3, and I think this is get it wrong. Like, numbers are there, but like the way he plays it is very, very different from even the way in which Tuchel played it, right? Tuchel, if you could like think of a Heleno Herrera style, like, you have one marauding wing back, but like it's a different system altogether. Um, it's a very tough system to coach, but I think a very well coached 3-4-3 is probably the hardest system to play against, right? That's maybe how I would characterize it. And you basically put him in a situation where he doesn't have the right profiles and he didn't have any time to coach the team, and they're like mentally and physically fragile in every way possible. So lots of sympathy for Ruben, like I think, and he's come out of this I think with a lot of dignity, right? I think that's maybe where like Ten Hag, at some point in time, when you take your principles and lay them bare, you're kind of the emperor with like no clothes, right? And he, I think, lost his dignity towards the end. He became a politician who was prevaricating, not somebody who was inspiring. As long as that doesn't happen with Ruben, I think that itself is like a huge win. But he started off really well, just in terms of like doing that, even though the results have really not been good enough. Full
Yeah,
stop. Um,
yeah.
the the one thing that comes to mind just is like, we're in January. It's open. We're broke. Um, who do you think is like one player we can go out there and get maybe on cheap that you think would really help the system in the short to medium term, just given what we have and where there are gaps?
I genuinely, again, I think we kind of touched upon this the last time we spoke about. Like, I think a wing back is priority right now. But like, there isn't, I don't know, maybe a Region loan that we kind of discussed. Like, I'm just looking at like someone who's Premier League proven. I don't think even like the Kirkazes of the world, the eight Nouris, like, I don't think these teams are going to be willing to kind of negotiate with us. But when you have someone, again, Spurs are also injury, like, are stuck with injury. So I'm looking at that at the Premier League. I don't see options that are again going to be immediate fixes. I know there's talk of like Rashford and Kvaratskhelia potentially being involved in a swap, but I don't see that
I
happening
don't see
either.
that at all. And I think the one which I had, which is just a bit of like a left wing one, left field one, just seeing bit of like Hoyland struggles, right? And it's like very understandable struggles. It's just that Xerxes is not a replacement in this 3-4-3 system for the front striker, right? So my question then becomes like, and Rashford's out as well. So who do you play if Hoyland can't play every game? And we know he can't play every game. So I think like somebody like a DCL on the cheap, given he's got 6 months left, would be a really, really smart move, just because I think it'll help us, have an outfall where because he's outstanding in the air. He's probably the one person that's given, like, let's say, a Saliba and Gabriel, like, their toughest battles, and even a Van Dijk in some cases, right, as a single man up top. That could be an interesting place to go, right? Just in terms of like cheap, smarter deals. If they're not long-term deals, of course, at like bad money. Because I think like you just have to find a way of like allowing Amorim to build into a system, and I think that kind of a deal would like really help us do that without compromising.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting shout and definitely left field. I feel like if there is a deal to be done there, like at center forward, then I'm again awesome and someone who's been kind of mentioned very actively. Um, I feel like this team needs an injection of goals. Like again, with today, like you saw with Hoyland as well, and we keep talking about he's young, that he needs time to grow. Like again, those are the kind of chances that are should be like a striker's bread and butter. And it was the technique, like rather than the outcome that bothered me, it was just the fact that he just went straight at Allison instead of like either trying a dink or trying to kind of get it between his legs, which is what you'd expect from a forward in that, like, from that angle to do. So I think I think this team is starved of goals. I don't think Ahmad is going to chip in every game. I don't think Bruno's like copped the goals in him that he did a couple of years back. So I feel like this team is really going to struggle to score even in the next 6 months. I feel like if Osimhen is a potential option and Rashford wants to go the other way, like maybe
That makes a lot more sense than a Kvara swap, like swap, right? I just can't see that happening. Of course, like I don't see Conte being very pleased with somebody who's not willing to track back or work hard, but he's generally willing to create systems in which like the true like two or three people in attack are like having a bit more license. He did that with like Hazard, for example, and he's done that previously. I think at like with Kane and Son as well at Spurs. So yeah, will be interesting to see. But what's next, right? So I think like a bit of a fill up to start the year. It can't be worse than 2024. That has to be the kind of operating assumption here. What's your sense for the next few weeks ahead?
again, I think I stick to what I said in the previous episode, wherein to me it's progression in terms of how we're playing and seeing that the 3-4-3 evolve into what he wants it to be, like getting there step by step, to me is progress. And to me, avoiding relegation and finishing, I know, I know everyone
Kids
like
these days,
laughs,
man. Kids these days.
everyone laughs at it, but I genuinely feel like if we'd lost today, and like if you look at some of the fixtures that we have coming up, whether it's Brighton, whether it's Fulham away, Spurs, like it's again every game in the Premier League is tough, right? Like so, like I feel like again, and I don't think this team is like mentally strong enough to kind of deal with being in a scrap like that. That being said, jokes aside, I feel like as long as we see some of the chatter around United die down over the next few months, I don't mind us getting knocked out of the cups. I don't mind us finishing like bottom half, like 11th or 12th or 13th or whatever. As long as we see some progression and we see some of the controversy around Rashford, Garner, all of that like calm down, or if we find solutions for these problems, I'm happy. And I think that then you have a summer with Amorim, give him a squad, and we go from there.
I think also like I'd love to see a little bit more refereeing luck and consistency, right? Not to be somebody who like keeps harping about the same thing again and again, but like it's just very dispiriting when you're watching a sport and you just feel like the decisions are being driven by like TRP ratings rather than like actual logic, right? So I think
Yeah,
that's the biggest issue. Even today, like a couple of those challenges were disgraces, like the Nunes challenge and like I
the
didn't see any
Maguire
second.
Maguire challenge on Salah, like that very clearly won the ball, and Oliver awarded him a free kick in a really promising position, which I think Trent should have gone for. Even like honestly, I know that I mean I'm not debating the penalty whatsoever at all. It was just silly proof Delict to have his hands there, but like and again that
But
speaks
that
to our
happened
luck.
against Spurs, right? And like I
Exactly,
don't
and it's
remember Romero
Michael
getting
Oliver.
that, but
Michael
it's a
Oliver.
like
That's the
it's
point.
a lack of consistency that's the bit of an issue, right? And like listen, Arsenal fans, I think like being it's always funny watching Arsenal fan go up in smoke, right? But the reality is like they would be pretty aggrieved as well, and I would be if I were an Arsenal fan, and I think I'm pretty aggrieved as a United fan. It just feels like there are certain clubs that are getting decisions and certain which are not, and those seem to change right over time. Like we got a lot of decisions, I would say myself, during the whole like Ole period when he first came to the club. And it can't help but feel like there's a narrative that they know will sell clicks. And they've been advised to give decisions that sell clicks rather than decisions that, are the right sporting decisions. And if that's the case, I think it's all great in the short term. But once people start feeling that, I think it's very hard for the league to walk something like that back. So that's a separate conversation to be had. But like, when you start questioning the sporting merits of decisions, then I think it's very dirty in terms of like where the league is going, right? So I think that's a separate conversation to be had.
For sure. But again, I think just to sum it all up, I think this is a result that we didn't really expect. I know you called a nil-all draw
For a
yesterday,
draw, I
so
don't want to say.
good on
Yeah,
that. But I think it's a good way to start the year in terms of the performance, right? Like to go to Anfield to kind of perform the way we did, not lose our heads after going a goal down. And like it's easy. I was feeling so hard done by the situation, right? It's not like we were completely fell apart and we conceded 2 goals. But I think this is something to build off of. Hopefully, again, I think the last time we put in a great performance against a rival, the City, we went to we went to Tottenham and completely. I thought he got his team wrong in that game as well, and we didn't. We kind of fell apart. Um, Hopefully that doesn't happen against Arsenal, and hopefully we can again just put in a good performance. Like I'm not worried about the results in the cups at least for now. So hopefully we can build off of that, and next Sunday when we talk, we're hopefully talking about a win and not a disappointing draw or a defeat.
well,
Yeah, thank you so
we'll see
much,
you
and
there.
yeah, we'll see you.